I wish your Majesty to understand the motive that moves me to make this statement is the peace of my conscience and the belief of the guilt I share. For we have destroyed by our evil behaviour such a government as was enjoyed by these natives. They were so free of crime and greed, both men and women, that they could leave gold or silver worth 100,000 pesos in their open house. So that when they discovered that we were thieves and men who sought to force their wives and daughters to commit sin with them, they despised us. But now things have come to such a pass in defence of God, owing to the bad example we have set them in all things, that these natives from doing no evil have turned into people who can do no good. I beg God to pardon me, for I move to say this, seeing that I am the last to die of the conquistadors. Monsieur Sir Leguizamon, the last conquistador. From the years of 1438 to 1533, the Incan Empire was considered one of the most advanced non-Eurasian civilizations to ever exist. It appears by many to be a good example of a socialist nation which held the financial and social aspects to facilitate features such as expansive communication and welfare systems stretching across the empire in what is now modern-day Ecuador to northern Patagonia in modern Argentina. This great example of an ideal society abruptly ended when the Spanish arrived and destroyed more than half the population and obligated the remains to work death in Andean silver mines. It's genuinely believed that the Spanish were responsible for its collapse, but perhaps other features, such as the rebellion of tribes within the empire or religion, which was a factor that ever prevented the Incan Empire from re-emerging, and provides a challenging contrast to the common viewpoint that it was purely the fault of the conquistadors. The first reason for the Incan Empire and its collapse consists of the Battle of Cajamarca. In 1532, after months of diplomacy and espionage between Francisco Pizarro and his small band of conquistadors, and Sapa Inca Atahualpa and his massive court, it seems as if the Spanish made advances in the conflict in an attempt to capture the Sapa Inca and to ransom him for precious goods, such as the high-grade silver and gold found in the Andean mountains. This event was known to have taken place, yet the circumstances and outcomes differ between the accounts of individuals. One interpretation of the battle stems from John Hemming's The Conquest of the Inca. Hemming is an English explorer born in 1935 who holds a particular interest in Andean civilization. Hemming describes Cajamarca as a strategically intelligent massacre and capture operation which held dire consequences on the Inca. He states, 7 or 8 Spaniards spurred up and grabbed the litter, heaved on it and was turned it to its side. Atahualpa was captured in this way, and also the quote, the sheer rate of killing was appalling, even if one allows that many Indians died from trampling or suffocation, or that the estimates of the dead were exaggerated. The quote also highlights that the Spanish attempt to capture Atahualpa petrified the Inca and caused them to be paralysed, making them susceptible to be murdered in large quantities and therefore leading to a decisive Spanish success. Another interpretation for the Battle of Cajamarca originates in the scriptus Jerez, the secretary of Pizarro himself who was present during the battle. Jerez highlighted the battle as uncontested, with him noting that during the whole time no Indian raised his arms against a Spaniard. After Atahualpa's capture, not all those who bore the litter of Atabaliba appeared to be principal chiefs. They were all killed. Both quotes highlight the extent of the Inca massacre that day and the power imbalance created by the capture of Atahualpa. Therefore, the Battle of Cajamarca can be viewed as a key conquistador-led factor to the decline of the Incan Empire, since Atahualpa's capture and later ransom for a room filled once with gold and twice with silver can be confirmed as a Spanish effort of the empire's destruction, since both Spaniards present and future historians with no Spanish affiliation can both agree with that idea. But, to contrast a view that the conquistadors were most likely to be the main cause for the Incan Empire's destruction, consists of the Incan Civil War a few years prior to major Spanish intervention. After the death of the powerful and popular Huayna Capac smallpox, likely caused by indirect transmission from Europeans, the kingdom was divided between his 2 sons. The older Huascar, yet the favourite Atahualpa, they ruled their respective areas of the kingdom peacefully for a while, yet Atahualpa became ambitious and decided to destroy Huascar with his professional army, led by notable military minds such as Quizquiz. The war caused devastation in its 3 years of existence, from 1529 to 1532, and led to a divided kingdom with hundreds of thousands estimated dead. Eventually, Atahualpa imprisoned Huascar and ordered Quizquiz to venture north and eliminate Huascar's relatives to prevent pretenders interfering with his sphere of influence. The accomplished American historian W.H. Prescott makes note of the event in his book, The History of Peru. Hostilities which soon broke out between the rival brothers were stated with irreconcilable, and considering the period was so near that of the Spanish invasion, with unaccountable discrepancy. The quote highlights that he believes that the war definitely took its toll on the Inca, and weakened them just before the Spanish arrived. Prescott also makes note of the impact the Civil War held on distant tribes, within the empire, such as the Canary of what is now modern-day Ecuador. The centre for Canary, Tucambamba, was described as entering the captive city like a conqueror. He put his inhabitants to the sword and razed it with all its stately edifices. The quote highlights that Atahualpa attempted to eradicate all resistance of tribes such as the Canary in order to assert power in the region. Therefore, the Incan Civil War does highlight a possibility of the fall of the empire being not entirely the fault of the Spaniards, but an internal power struggle in which the aftermath caused rifts across Tawantinsuyo. Prescott's claims, I believe, are perfectly eligible, since he was born 250 years after the Spanish expedition and was known to have written many books about historical events highlighting his lack of preference for either Incan or Spanish perspectives, and that his judgment is purely as a historian and not as a politician. Another conquistador-related idea for the collapse of the Incan Empire does not place much emphasis of Atahualpa's execution by garroting, but instead the systematic eradication of the Inca throughout decades of oppression leading up to the execution of Tupac Amaru in 1572 and the subsequent collapse of the Neo-Inca state. These oppressive events are said to have demoralised every aspect of the Inca's will to live and have caused a massive population decline, still visible today, which provides even more credibility of my extensive agreement that the conquistadors were the primary cause for the collapse of the Incan Empire. These acts of oppression by the Spanish ranged from conscription to work in silver mines to farming in Spanish-owned land for mere sustenance. One such instance of an establishment of such suffering originated in the Potosi mines. Located high in the mountains of what is now modern-day Colombia, the Potosi mines were discovered in 1545 by an Inca named Diego Gualpa, who was searching the area for a shrine. He, however, found himself gripping upon high-grade silver ore during his ascent and reported it to the Spanish. In particular, the local majordomo Diego de Villarreal, regional overseer and manager of the Inca, reportedly found 5 fabulous rich veins, causing a silver rush that was soon in progress. Hemming initially interpreted that the Inca were treated well with good wages and were allowed to prospect on their own account on rest days. However, as the years progressed, the greed of the crowns of both Castile and Aragon became increasingly visible, with the welfare from the Inca decreasing to the extent that they were now regarded more as capital instead of human beings. However, with Potosi alone producing 150,000 to 200,000 pesos worth of silver each week, and with the royal court possessing a 20% tax, the lives of the Inca were soon neglected, as the Spanish were blinded by greed. Missionary Domingo de Santo Tomas says, "They were discovered a mouth of hell, into which a great mass of people every year enter, and are sacrificed for the greed of the Spaniards to their god." The opinion accurately matches the conditions faced in the mine, which entailed hundreds of locally conscripted Inca from across the former empire, traversing into the mines to work a 1-week shift with only thin clothing, a candle and a pickaxe to survive. This form of labour obviously crippled the workers, who would face serious issues such as silicosis, arsenic and mercury poisoning, arthritis and later pneumonia upon the steep gradient between the sweltering mines and the cold Andean highlands. Therefore, Hemming and the Spanish sources mentioned in this book convey a strong conviction that the Spanish and their forced labour methods led to a collapse of the Incan Empire and the native Quechua-speaking people, since although mining and labour methods were common in Europe, the content lifestyles of the Inca were not compatible with harsh labour in mines and caused a crippling of the young male Inca, which would later hold effect on the birth rates, causing a subsequent decline of the Inca culture. Before Spanish arrival, however, the Incan Empire was not completely contained as we think it was. One particular occasion of rebellion highlights the fragmented truth of the Incan Empire. One of these consists of the Canary tribe and their attitudes to the Cuzco rulers after the Civil War. The Canary were a tribe in what is now northern Ecuador and were invaded by the Inca in the early 16th century. They notably sided with Huascar in the Civil War and had their capital city of Tucambamba destroyed. Therefore, when the Spanish asserted power over the Inca completely in 1533, they were willing to assist in their conquest in return for the revenge of the genocide of their people. A few years later, in 1536, Spanish-installed Sapa Inca, Manco Inca, was permitted to leave Spanish supervision to partake in a religious event, yet instead he amassed a sizable army, with eyewitnesses claiming it to be sized between 100,000 to 200,000 men, an attempt to eliminate the Spanish. The short siege caused mass distress across both sides, of Titacuzi, the son of Manco Inca, who would later become the future Sapa Inca of the Neo-Inca, says, "The battle was a bloody affair from both sides, because of the many natives who were supporting the Spaniards. Among these were 2 of my father's brothers called Inquil and Huaspar, with many of their followers, and many Chapoyas and Canary. The battle eventually led to a Spanish victory, with Manco retreating into Vilcabamba and forming the rump Neo-Inca state, which would agitate the Spanish for years to come." But the Canary and other tribes volunteering to act as auxiliary troops for the Spanish during the siege of Cuzco in 1536 shows that the Inca had more than just the Spanish as their enemy. The vengeful nature of the Canary, who wished nothing more than to destroy the remnants of their conquest without regard or payment or any asset in return from the Spanish. Tutacuzi's writings also provide a likely accurate and incredibly useful source of information on this event, since its written nature is unlike its Incan predecessors' documentation upon Quipu or a spoken language, and it is therefore comprehensible and truthful about the events that occurred on those few days. Another crucial factor to the Incan Empire's collapse, which I have not mentioned heavily until this moment, consists of the smallpox epidemic across the New World and in particular, the Incan Empire. It is well known that the disease was particularly deadly to the people of the New World and caused the deaths of the Sapa Inca Huayna Capac and Tupac Hualpa. When the Spanish captured Atahualpa in 1532, they interrogated him on the situations leading to the current circumstances of the empire. One of these consists of the origin and the effects of the sickness brought upon the Andean population. Francisco Jerez, secretary to Pizarro, states that his translator asked Atahualpa about the Sapa Inca Huayna Capac, who was the last Inca to hold complete and stable control over the empire, and the translator stated that he had died of that sickness in reference to smallpox. Francisco Pizarro's 17-year-old page/half-brother Pedro Pizarro states that the translator also told him that Huayna Capac was sickened by smallpox and died. Therefore, if these sources speak true, one of the most influential and powerful Inca had been eliminated by a conquistador-caused disease, and this epidemic does not just take place on a small scale, but on a massive one, with a debated 6% of the native population remaining after the Spanish settled. It is also worth noting that the sources of both Pedro Pizarro and Jerez differ in credibility. Jerez wrote his works directly, as his works were published only a year after Atahualpa's execution in 1533. The immediate publication of his works does highlight the potential accuracy of the source, so although it's translated for a medium, I imagine the meaning hasn't digressed too much. Pedro Pizarro, however, composed his narrative in 1571, and according to Stannard, author of the American Holocaust, was likely influenced by other events. Therefore, although I am firm in my confidence in the information of Jerez, my faith in Pedro Pizarro's writings is by no means high. During the 15th and 16th centuries, Spain was, like most of Europe, a hub for evangelism. With the Inquisition starting in 1478 and the Reconquista ending in 1492, the kingdoms of both Castile and Aragon were heavily involved in the mixing of politics and religion. Therefore, it was no surprise that when the conquistadors took over the Incan Empire, missionaries would set forth to convert local populations. Subsequently, notable events ensued, such as Atahualpa's baptism by Vicente de Valverde, the destruction of temples such as Coricancha, the temple dedicated to Inti, the sun god, and the creation of Christian administration centres by notable individuals such as Domingo de Santo Tomas. Therefore, it was only a matter of a generation or so for Catholicism to spread across the former empire, diminishing the former spiritualist religion of the Incan Empire. The number of Catholics in modern-day Peru emphasised the missionaries' effectiveness, with the 2017 census highlighting that the country is 76% Catholic, with no significant trace of the old religion. To end this video, I must conclude that I truly and passionately believe that the conquistadors were the most significant cause for the collapse of the Incan Empire. This is due to although many issues such as tribe rebellion and resentment existed from 1471, from Tupac Inca Yupanqui's expansion of the empire, and later events such as the civil war and religious conversion, I still believe many of these issues were caused by Pizarro and his roughly 150-strong army. This is highlighted by the fact that events such as the Incan Civil War would have possibly not even have happened if Huayna Capac did not succumb to smallpox. However, the constant internal struggles weakening the foundations of the Incan Empire made the Incan Empire the most vulnerable it had ever been, meaning that although Spanish intervention absolutely caused its collapse, so many overlook the core weaknesses behind the facade of the Incan Empire, which made the nation so susceptible to the Spanish conquest.